Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to the Matchfit Football Podcast. I'm Darren Potts, your host, and today I am joined by a striker. And she has played in Scotland, she has played in England, she is a Scottish international. It is Abby Harrison. Abby, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to chatting all things about football.
Anytime we can chat about football, it's always a good thing, isn't it? And obviously your career, youngest ever player in the, up in Scotland, your youngest ever goal scorer, incredible records up there. But take us back, our listeners are young people who want to go pro. They want this to get into the game. Maybe they are young professionals and they want to evolve in their game and get better. But take me back to the start of your journey. When did it become a serious thing for you? And when did you make that conscious decision that this is what I'm going to do?
Do you know what? Probably a lot later than most people you'll hear from. I think being a woman as well, you don't really know what opportunities are going to be. And of course, when I was in primary school, when the teacher asked what I wanted to be, I would write down footballer. And if the boys that wrote that down thought that they got a good laugh out of their answer, then mine was a bit more of a howl from the teachers. But yeah, it wasn't really, it's just something that I absolutely love doing. And even if it wasn't my job, I would play it every single day. So I was just progressing nicely through the Celtic Academy, which, if it had ended like that, then I've managed to pull on the team that I supported going up strip and do it a few times. So I was just plodding along, probably naively thinking everything's going well. Something might come of it, but if it doesn't, I'm still in school. I've got education. There's different avenues I can go down. And then it was probably when I was about 16, I did there was a scholarship sort of program through the SFA. And I moved through to Edinburgh to start that. And, I was training with people that had been doing this 3 or 4 years that were in the A squad, and very much it was a level up for me. And it was probably at that moment that, although I had always dreamed of it, that's when I was like, right, it's now or never. Let's turn this dream into a reality. And from there, it just progressed, and here I am now.
It's a phenomenal story, a phenomenal journey, and I know you've really just kind of put it into a nutshell there for the purpose of this podcast. But one of the things that you mentioned was in school, whenever you put down you wanted to be a footballer, and the teacher kind of laughed at you or whatever that was. When we talk about overcoming obstacles, as we will come on to later in the podcast, and we're talking about maybe we'll talk about your injury and stuff then from a while back, but specifically overcoming that barrier. There's obviously a lot more opportunities now for young girls growing up that want to become professional footballers. But at that stage, you were kind of laughed at and you were kind of mocked. Was that hard to deal with at the time? Did that faze you at all? Or was that something that you just took in your stride and went?
When I look back, and I think if you were to tell me my story as somebody else, I would say, oh, that sounds awful, or how did you deal with that? But to me, it was just the norm, whenever I played football. The reason I started was because my big brother played football. Got dragged about with him and put in goals when his friends weren't there and stuff like that. So I was always sort of up against it. It was always me and him against everyone else, in terms of I would be his first choice on the team, but he also knew nobody else was going to pick me. So it was probably just normality to me that people didn't really think I was going to do anything. And that's just sort of a motivation for me. And yeah, just sort of strolled through life playing football on the streets, surprising people. And that's what, that's why I love the game. It's something that luckily I've been all right at and managed to develop at, but still now, I want to prove people wrong. And that's not only outsiders. I want to prove myself and see where I can take it. But of course, it's obstacles, but I think I was probably naive back then, in the sense of I was just a young girl playing football. I was always just known as, the girl that plays football. Sometimes people would know me that over that rather than my name. So I was just kind of always up against it, in that sense that, if it was teachers or if it was people on the street, it didn't really faze me for what I wanted to do. And ultimately, at the age where I didn't know if it was going to be achievable or not, what I knew above anything else was it was where I was my happiest. So I just stuck at it, and lucky enough, I've come out the other side.
It's a phenomenal, portion, I think, to hear from someone off their journey of how they kind of came through in those small moments, those moments of going out with your brother and dragged along to play football and jumpers for goalposts. That's how I grew up as
Mm.
well. And you kind of look to where you are now. You're Scottish international. You're playing at Bristol City. You mentioned, coming up through the Celtic Academy, and I want to touch on that a little bit because you mentioned putting the Celtic jersey on and being able to play for the team that you supported. You obviously came up through the Celtic ranks. You were the youngest at the time, the player, starter, and goal scorer, in SWPL history. And that was all through Celtic. You must have immense pride, not just playing for Celtic, but being able to break those records all at the same time while playing for the club that you love and support.
Yeah, I think it's sort of back to it again when you're living in that moment and it's your journey and it's your story. I don't think you really appreciate it. And at the time, don't get me wrong, I know I was very, very lucky in pulling that strip on, and every single time I didn't take it for granted. But I think, I'm a striker. So once I progressed through the academy, the next stage was just first team. And I think, like, you speak to a lot of people that maybe haven't came through academies and stuff, and it's, wow, that was an amazing achievement. But for me at the time, it was just that next, natural progression. Obviously, being a striker, if I didn't score, it probably would have been concerning. So, as much as I look back on it now with great pride, and obviously the achievements sort of speak for themselves, I also understand that I was very fortunate. It wasn't the plan to have me in the team that young. It was, unfortunately for other people, I got the opportunity because they were injured. And it just, they were sort of forced to have to turn to me, and it was an opportunity that I took up. So I think that is the main thing in terms of, and even now, people will say, oh, it's amazing you played for Scotland or you scored that goal for Scotland. But for me, and it's probably my biggest downfall as well, is I just focus just switches right away to what's the next thing. I might have been in the Scotland squad this time and scored, but how can I make sure I'm in the Scotland squad every time and continuing to score? So as much as the achievements are great, I think I'll appreciate them more, once my career's over, and hopefully once, I don't know, maybe I'm the oldest scorer for Celtic women, who knows?
Absolutely. I mean, it's phenomenal when you mention, even being in the Scotland squad and scoring the goal in the last game that you played for Scotland and everything that encompasses that. But I just think back growing up, living the dream, supporting a club, playing for that club, and then not only representing that club, but representing the country and everything that goes along inside that. I know you mentioned that you got lucky in the sense that players got injured, then you got your opportunity. But that's also part and parcel of the game, that you were ready, you were equipped, you were ready to go, you're excited to go, and you came in and you not only just were given that opportunity, but you took that opportunity. And I think for young people listening to this that hear your story as well, it wasn't just like, oh, someone's injured, we'll just chuck her in. There was an opportunity given and presented to you, and you were able to take that opportunity, and it's only went from strength to strength for you. Your goals to game record at Hibernian was scary, and I think sometimes that motivation, that desire, and that opportunity given to you is so vitally important. And one of the things I want to ask about as well is you've played for a couple of different clubs now. What is it about a club that attracts a player, or what is it about you as a player that makes you want to go and play for a club? For young people listening to this that maybe have a decision to make on an academy to join or a couple of contracts on the table, what is it like? What should they be looking out for?
Yeah, I think it depends massively and where you are in that moment, in terms of playing for Celtic. That was the first girls' club I played for, and I wouldn't have left my boys' team for any other club, So in terms of that, it was a no-brainer. I didn't even know I was going to the trial. My mum dragged me out one Friday night and told me to bring my boots, and yeah, I turned up and I left, probably 8-9 years later. And then the move to Hibs came about, and at that point in my career, it was purely just based on, I'd played a good couple of seasons with Celtic, and it was the hardest decision I've probably ever had to make, because although I'm like absolutely loved my time there and we were a good squad, it was the club that I grew up supporting, and as you grow up, like all I could think about was playing for Celtic. And if you told 9, 10-year-old me that I got that opportunity and then I moved on, I would say, no, like that's ridiculous. You wouldn't do that. It's your team. So the move to Hibs was purely just based on, taking football to the next level. Obviously, I moved through to Edinburgh, but at that point it was Hibs were going to push and try and compete with City, which I think was, as much as they deserve the utmost respect, Glasgow City, for what they did in Scottish football. I think every other team probably for a long time gave them too much respect, and we all just settled for being second best. That was almost what you were playing for every year, and it just, yeah, the thought of going to Hibs and being able to challenge and win trophies and try and knock them off their peg, it was just something that I couldn't turn down. And luckily, as I look back, it was the right decision, as much as it was hard. And then obviously, as I moved to Bristol, it's taking your football to that next step again. So it's the opportunity to go full time and be a professional and live my dream. And I think if I didn't take the opportunity to come to Bristol for whatever reason that may have stopped me, I could have regretted that for the rest of my life. So I think you know when the time's right and when the moment's right in terms of a club and a feel that you get, but they just have to, put you first, and your values and what you want to achieve need to align with each other. There's no point getting all the money in the world and sitting on a bench or playing for a club that maybe doesn't represent your values and how you see the game. So I think the biggest bit of advice I can give is when you get the right feeling, and when you're speaking to people that have you and at the forefront of their mind, and they need to respect you as a person and a player, and moves are difficult. You have a lot to come up with. I think external people can just say, oh, big new signing, they're going to settle in straight away, but there's loads of hurdles that you need to overcome, and you need to have a club and a good support system around you that give you the time and the patience for you to then reach your potential within their club.
You've said something interesting there, and it's just got my, the cogs turning in my brain as well. Sometimes, and I'm guilty of it as well, we're just out of the end of January and transfer deadline day and all the stuff that comes alongside that. And sometimes you just see player coming in, player going out, and this club has signed 10 players and this club has signed 2 players. But you mentioned about it being right for you as a person. And I think sometimes that's a point that's missed a lot, not just by the media, but by fans as well. But these aren't just players; they are people. They are persons, with emotions, with feelings, and moving down to those clubs. When you move down there, you're obviously having to find a place to live. You're trying to embed in a new squad and get to know the new girls and get to know the new coach and all the philosophy that the club operates. And maybe they operate on, you come at 9 o'clock in the morning. Maybe Hibs was at 11 o'clock. There's so many differences that have to come into it. And I think that's overlooked a lot, in the media, and by fans as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, the move from Celtic to Hibs was a lot easier to adjust because, I was playing in the same league against the same opposition. I wasn't moving too far away from home, but, the jump down here was just massive. And that's off the pitch. That's nothing to do with the football. That's just moving away from home properly. And as you say, finding somewhere to live, meeting new teammates for the first time. And then when you look at the football point of view, it's a completely different game, played in a different way, adapting to being professional. It's so much. And I think, and then even at times probably I'm bad for it if Celtic sign a new player and it's a big headline and you're thinking, why are they not playing good enough already? What's going on? That's big money, but it does take time. And I think only when, and it's something that, I'll stand by and shout from the rooftops, is all players need to be happy away from the game in order to get the best out of them on the football pitch. And I think sometimes that can be overlooked. But, if you're happy and things are good off the pitch, you'll bring your best on it. Speaking
of that, what is it off the pitch that you feel will make a player feel good on the pitch? Is it a support circle? Is it friends? Is there a number of different things?
Yeah, I think it's different things for different individuals. I think there will be some things, that are the same, and you've mentioned it there. A support circle is massive. I know personally I keep mine, pretty small. And I think that sort of comes from, I've had people come in and out of my life, and they're there in the good times and they're nowhere to be seen in the bad times. And everyone has that. But I think as people's profiles raise, and even people that, you might consider as friends, they can get caught up in thinking you live the glamorous lifestyle, and they want those benefits as well. So that's massive for me in terms of, I'm a big family person. I FaceTime my family every single day. I speak to, my mum, dad, brother and sister. They all come down to visit, and that's something that's just massive for me, because I think that, that keeps me grounded. It keeps me in reality. If all the media and everyone down here is saying, "Oh, you're doing fantastic, you've scored in the last 7 games, and that's 7-7 now," I pick up the phone and speak to my dad, and he says, "Yeah, but you should have had 3 or 4 last game alone. So although, you're on a good run, let's get better, because you can achieve more." And that's why I'm, where I'm at, because I've got people to ground me when I need grounded, and we achieve it, like, everything together. The highs are enjoyed and celebrated, and the lows, that they'll support me through it. So it's everything off the pitch. It's friends, it's relationships, it's making sure you're comfortable where you're living. Like, it's absolutely everything. There's too much to mention, but the social circle, I think, is a massive thing, because especially in probably more young males and females, it's everyone has an idea of the life that they think you're living, and they want to be a part of that, and they want to say they know you when you're doing well, and they want a little something off you, if that's tickets to a game, if that's a pair of boots. It's always people wanting from you and not really giving much back. So keep, the close ones as close as you can.
I think something that you've mentioned, you mentioned it earlier on the podcast, and you've sort of hinted at it there as well, is your competitiveness. You mentioned that you've scored 7-7, but your dad's like, well, you could have had 3 in the last game. Like, what's that about? And then, you mentioned it earlier that you had to leave Celtic for footballing reasons, because you wanted to challenge. You didn't want to just accept being behind Glasgow City. You wanted to fight and try and knock them off their perch. And you've mentioned that, there as well, with your dad being blunt and upfront with you, being like, yeah, I've scored 7-7, great, but you could have had 10-7. Is
Yeah.
that something you feel you need?
Do you know what? If you speak to probably anybody that I've been in a squad with, they'll tell you I'm the most competitive person they'll ever have met. Just coaches, players, whatever it is, I could be playing cards and I want to do everything I possibly can to beat you. The other night, as a few of us from the team went bowling, and I was absolutely diabolical. I'm not good at bowling, but I was so angry that I wasn't winning. And that transfers, into football as well. Like, if it's even just something small as as a rondo, or a passing drill with or a possession, anything, I just want to win. It's just my mindset that the thought of losing is horrendous, and that's not coming last, that's coming second as well, by the way. Like, it's not something that I enjoy. I'm too competitive, probably for my own good, that sometimes stands in my way. But it's just something I've always been like, and my family are all the same. There's none of that, we'll let the youngest win when we're playing board games. I wasn't brought up with that. It was, you play something, or you're involved in something, and it's not just to be there and make up the numbers. Or you hear it a lot in schools all the time, and it's just for fun, everyone's involved. Nah, that was never the case for me. Everything I do, I want to win, and that's just the way that I've been brought up, and the way that I will continue to live my life. And yeah, albeit it has its bad parts as well, when I'm screaming, down the changing room because I've just lost heady tennis. But it's what you see is what you get with me, and it's something I pride myself on as well, because I think it transfers on the pitch on a Sunday, but also off the pitch. I don't want to ever be the last, and as I say, even second. I want to be the best at everything I do, so I leave no stone unturned.
I think it's a phenomenal attitude to have, and to liken it to someone that I adore. I've always been a huge fan of Roy Keane, and when I hear Roy Keane do interviews, even older ones I'm talking about, when he sees like, oh, I'm playing Zidane, he goes, I don't want a shirt, I want to beat him, things like that. And I think that
Yeah.
attitude and that mentality will carry you so far in the game that it's needed, really, to succeed.
Yeah, no, massively. And I think it's something that, I touched on it there with schools. And it's the same, growing up at grassroots level. And I think as well, within academies, it's kind of fluffy around the edges, in sense of, we want you to get to first team, and if one of this squad gets the first team, we've did something right. But for me, I can't set off doing anything without wanting to win. And I think that's massive. And it stands out. Some coaches like it, some coaches hate it. If we're playing a bounce game at training and I get called offside and I don't think I'm straight on, the videos after training. And if it's the wrong call, I'm right on to them and I'm saying, that's not good enough. I could have scored. We could have won the game. Like it's constant. So it does have its probably negatives and some people won't like it, but that's just how I am and I won't change.
I think those attributes, though, as one, how you are and you know how you operate, and that's the way you've always been. And I think that is what matters is that you are competitive and you want to win. And if you're playing a game of football and you're getting beat, 1-0, but the other team has all the ball and maybe some people's heads drop, you're like, no, I'm not accepting this. I want to win. I think it's vital for every single team to have people like that in that team.
Yeah, no, massively. And it's difficult at times as well, because I think when you are like that and not everyone's like that. And that's, I guess, the beauty of team sports is you've got different personalities and different characters. But, I can't accept poor standards, and it does come from that competitiveness. So I think it allows me, I can't shout at anyone else unless I'm holding these standards to myself and holding myself accountable for when I don't do things as good as I can. So I think if everyone has that winning mentality, and it doesn't need to be as extreme as mine in the sense of wanting to win absolutely everything. But I think it is important. And as you say, when the going gets tough, I'll be the one that stands up and grabs it, with both hands and tries to take it under control. And albeit sometimes maybe put too much pressure on my own shoulders. But as I say, that's me and I know that that's me. So, if I've not pre-warned you before I meet you and we compete against each other, you'll know pretty soon in. But, as soon as we're off the pitch, it's, I'm very laid back, I'm chilled, I'm a bit crazy, to be honest. So unless we're competing, I kind of just take life as it is and see where we end up.
I think it's fantastic to hear that, and it's interesting to hear the difference between you off the pitch and then on the pitch, especially when there's a competitive edge to it. One of the questions we like to always ask all our guests on the show is, we've talked about competitiveness and we've talked about, working hard, and you go back and you analyze videos and stuff. You mentioned that after training. In your opinion, what are the keys to success? What are the keys to elite performance?
Difficult question. I think a few sort of attributes that you need to have is something that I've always said. In football, you need to be the most selfish, selfless person in the room, which is a bit of a confusing quote. But if I adapt that to being on the pitch as a striker, I need to be selfish to get those goals, but also I understand that the most effective thing sometimes is me to be the most selfless person on that pitch, and that's what changes the game. And that's something that I stand by. It's being the person that will make an 80-yard sprint and run from centre forward all the way back to make a goal line clearance, because you want your defenders to get that clean sheet, and it means as much to you as it does the defenders. It's just, I don't know. Elite performance to me is just humility as well. Do the hard work behind closed doors. You don't need to scream it from rooftops and let everyone know what you're doing. And another thing that I'll always say is football and sport is probably the only career that you'll ever have where hard work does genuinely direct to seeing results and success. And I think that's the beauty of the game, that the harder the work you do on and off the pitch, it's those 1% that do make the difference. And that's why you see the guys at the top are the ultimate professionals. So it's just, humility, working hard, be determined, be selfish and look after yourself, but also be the most selfless person in the room, which some people might struggle with. But it's a team sport, you need everyone. You're not going to have your best game all the time, and you need people to pull you out the gutter. If that's just making sure we score 3 goals, if we've conceded 2, that's fine. But it's also making sure that if I've missed 5 goals, the 2 people next to me have managed to score 3 and we win the game. So be selfish, but be selfless, as confusing as that quote is, and just enjoy it. You're the absolute best performing when you're happy and doing something that you love, because even the hard work feels unbelievable. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I mean, it's phenomenal insight, and it's phenomenal insight not just to, the career of a professional footballer, but it's also phenomenal insight to you as a person. Those 1%, that extra work, the hard work. You mentioned, if you talk to a striker and you say, what's the most enjoyable part of football, they're going to say scoring goals. No striker generally brings up sprinting 80 yards to try and make a tackle in their own box. But that's what it takes sometimes to win. I think that insight that you've just given us into yourself, but also, maybe even the expectations of a professional footballer. And maybe that's the sort of standard that you hold. I think that's phenomenal for any of our listeners to listen to. And I echo all those thoughts. Work on those 1%, hard work, graft, determination, grit, and be motivated, and just give everything for your teammates, but also, be conscious of your own game and working on those 1%. And it's interesting you brought up those 1%, because I want to ask, what things have you done, maybe outside of corporate training, outside of from your football club, maybe on your own, that have helped improve your game?
Probably the biggest things that have improved my game relate absolutely nothing to football. Just in terms of being able to probably shut off and find, something away from football was one of the biggest things for me, because I'm so competitive, and I've spoke about that, but sometimes, that runs through your head. It's, if I go back and look at that video and I'm offside, I'm thinking, why is that? Or if I've not scored that goal, I'm thinking, that's not good enough. Why have I done that? And sometimes it is hard to switch off. And I think that's where, as I've grown up and I've realised that the benefits of being able to take that time to yourself to switch off means that, you don't have that burnout. So whether that's going for a walk, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and a lot of, self-learning books and stuff like that to me, it's just like one of my favourite podcasts is the high performance one. And I could be listening to the head of a sweets company, or I could be listening to an Olympic medalist, and I'll always pick something up that they're saying, because it is that, striving to be the best in your field. And that's probably one of the biggest things, is being, vulnerable enough to know that you've got so much to learn, and you can learn from absolutely anything, the things that might seem the end of the world, and the things that, when you are scoring, you can still do so much more. And that's just the biggest thing for me. Obviously, you've got the legs of training. I try to eat well, sleep well, and that is difficult, because anybody you speak to will say she's absolutely mad. She's constant, you can't be around her too long without having a headache. That's me all over. So it's difficult. And that's something that, growing up, I was 24/7. So as I've found, those moments, even if that's 10, 15 minutes to listen to a podcast, or to try and relax, do a bit of meditation, that's improved my game massively. And also, never underestimate the benefit of the things that, the physios and stuff going about, the stretching, the sleep, the nutrition, things that you've been told, quite vague things probably, that you've been told since a young age. Really delve into that, and it's not a one size fits all. You need to find your way, and it does take trial and error. It might take 4 or 5 years, but once you nail it, the results are massive, and that can stand for anything on or off the pitch.
I mean, some of your answers there, they're quite, they link up very well with an answer you gave earlier, when we were talking about, the keys to being a professional. And you mentioned that, it's not always a glamorous lifestyle. People have this perception that it is, but you're talking about your nutrition, your sleep, being able to switch off just to go for a walk or take the dog out or whatever, listen to a podcast. I think something that's overlooked a lot is the sacrificial aspect of being a professional footballer. There's the glitz, there's the glamour, there's playing on the pitch with the lights on, and it's great. But there's also the training every day. There's the nutrition, there's the diet, there's the sleep, there's being able to switch off, there's being able to not go on social media and see what some keyboard warrior is saying. There's so much stuff that encompasses, I think, being a professional footballer away from the actual pitch, that is totally overlooked. And one of the things we like to focus on here is definitely that nutrition. You said at times it can be difficult. Is that one of the hardest aspects of being a professional footballer?
I think, when I was growing up, probably more so, nothing in terms of home life. I've been very fortunate in the sense that, I've always ate well and home cooked meals. But I think it's probably that maybe the social pressures when you're growing up and going through school. It's being able to take the laughs and stick to your dream. If you're taking a wee pot of fruit, a wee pot of veg, when all your friends are going out and getting chicken burgers and chips and fizzy juice. And don't get me wrong, I wasn't the type of person that took fruit and veg. I learned the hard way, and I probably learned too late. But yeah, nutrition is really difficult because it is something that is so individualized, and I think it does take a lot of trial and error, and even that I could have ate the exact same way now when I'm performing quite well as what I did a year ago when performances weren't quite there. So there's so much that can make or break things, but if you're putting the right stuff in your body and giving yourself the best chance to support the training and the load and the stress, then it can only be a good thing. And that doesn't mean the diet needs to be squeaky clean 24/7. And if any footballer or athlete tells you that, they're absolutely lying, because we all need a little something of a treat. And if not, that's when you get the problems with a big binge, which then does actually hinder performance. It reduces recovery and stuff like that. But the information's out there, whether you don't have that help and access within your club. There's a lot out there, and there's a lot of people with good knowledge. It's just finding the right knowledge.
Yeah, it's finding the right knowledge, and then as you said, it's all individualized, and it's finding what works, for you as well. And one of the major parts of your career, in a sad way, was an ACL injury, and I want to touch on that and how you dealt with that injury, but also the recovery process and any lessons learned from that time period. Because I can imagine, as a very competitive person, that it was hard to be on the sidelines.
Yeah, do you know what? It's funny because obviously it's not good that I got that injury. But in terms of when I did it, so it happened in November 19. I got my operation the start of December, and then I was at home for the first maybe 2 or 3 weeks post operation, just because I couldn't do anything. So the club gave me some time at home, and my dad's a sports physio, so I was very fortunate in that sense. But came back to club, and in the first 3 months, absolute tough graft. It was the hardest 3 months that I had to deal with, because I was dealing so much with the mental side of it. It was being so competitive that I couldn't even get up out of the bed myself, and then it was learning how to walk again. And it was that vulnerability that you need to ask for help, or you're back to basics. And those 3 months were really, really tough. But and I hope anybody that seen me throughout my rehab journey will say that I was the hardest working person in the gym, and that's something that anybody that I speak to, I would like them to think of me as one of the hardest working people in the room, because that's what I aspire to be. But COVID then hit in the March, so pretty much as I was exactly 3 months, and I actually was coming home to surveys off. And I went home for 3 days and stayed for 6.5 months. The world shut down, sport shut down. So to many people, it was the worst, 6 months of their lives were in lockdown. For me, perfect. Couldn't write it any better. I missed 5 or 6 league games through the Acl injury, so I didn't have to battle with that, being on the sidelines and looking and wanting that to be me, or thinking I could make a difference. But then sport and as I say, the world just paused. And I think if I hadn't had that, rehab to focus on, I would probably look back in lockdown with a lot of regret, that, of time waste. And I think a lot of people do look back, and albeit, it was 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 3 weeks, and before you knew it, sort of time flew. But, I was able to go from not being able to run to the point in which I returned to Bristol. I was back full training. So I was able to be at home, get my head down. I was around, the people I'm closest with. I was around my family, and that almost took all of the mental struggles that you face during an injury away, because, as I say, I didn't need to come out of the changing room and turn left to the gym when all the players were going right on the pitch and want that to be me. It was just a time that was absolutely perfect, and in the way that it happened for me individually, in the sense of, right, yous have all stopped, but now I kick on, and the results and the way the club handled the rehab and being at home with my dad, like the physio was on hand if I needed it. And I can honestly say throughout the full of COVID, I didn't have a day off, and that might not have always been what was prescribed to me. Rest days are important, but for me in my head, there was always something I could do. And if that wasn't a proper session, it was going out and going for a walk and listening to podcasts or listening to interviews for people that have been through it already, and trying to pick up those tiny details of what helped them get back in the game, or what did they struggle with, to make sure that I didn't struggle with that. So the ACL injury was, you wouldn't wish it upon anyone, and naively you never think it's going to be you either, but it's probably the best thing in a roundabout way that ever happened to me in football, because it made me more competitive. It made me appreciate every single day, every single training session. I could be told to turn up to training and I couldn't even stand up. So it just brought everything into, reality and awareness, and also just appreciating everything so much more, because that could have been career over. Do you know what I mean? So I was fortunate. I was looked after. I was looked after by the club. I was surrounded by friends, family, loved ones. I was able to just completely focus on me without any outside noise or externals. And I think I've came back a better, faster, stronger footballer, but a braver, more determined and better person all round from it.
It's phenomenal insight. Obviously, to probably a hard time in your career, but turned out to be, a good time in your career in terms of your mindset and being with your family and everything else. So really, really glad to hear that. Is there anything that you learned over that period in terms of your recovery or injury prevention that you would still use to this day?
Oh yeah, massively. Take, all the, I leave no stone unturned in terms of everything in life. So if that means that I need to do 20 minutes, half an hour every day away from the club or before training to minimise that risk, I'll do it no matter what's going on. And there's so much I take from that, from, a physical point of view. I do my prehab. In terms of my loading, the club are very understanding and keeping that, we don't want dips, we don't want peaks as such. And I'm on that, and I'm honest. And sometimes, the sports scientists might get annoyed because when they're telling us to get in, it's a 3-game week. I'm saying, right, well, have I hit my high-speed runs? Have I hit my sprint distance? What is my overall distance? Because it's just realising and treating your body like the temple it is, because God was I was left speechless, I think, by just how impressive the body is when I was injured, the improvements over such minimal time. And it probably was because I was back at the very basics. I think as an athlete, you're training all the time and it's all you've ever known, whether that's in the gym, on the pitch, that actually just taking things back to basics and stripping it all back. And that's what I learned, was just trust the process, absolutely celebrate the small wins, if that was managing to get my legs straight, if that was being able to step up out of the bed, or even if that was whenever I did testing, there was absolutely no way on earth I was ever, no matter how tired I was or how painful it was, I was never ever letting myself get a lower score than what I had previous. And even at that, if the physio had notes of somebody that had done it before, and you're not supposed to compare yourself, but why not? That was something for me, that I was able to get that competitiveness. If it was a conditioning session with the other injured players, I would make sure that I was absolutely beating them at everything I did. Or if we were doing a boxing circuit, I'm absolutely leathering into those gloves, just because you never know when these small bits of effort will help you. And I think, seeing the difficulties of that, 90 minutes of football is not difficult. It's, no matter how tired or exhausted you might think you are, it's all superficial. It's all in your mind. That's exhausting, and that's not being able to stand up and walk. So, I'd run through a wall for any of my teammates, and I would slide tackle my own granny in order to score a goal.
I mean, it's a phenomenal insight into your mind, and I think a lot of this stuff like your injury prevention now, your rehab, even your competitiveness in terms of your comeback in your rehab. I think all of that gives us a great insight to how you think in terms of, again, that competitiveness and that will to win and that desire to play and to contribute to your team's success. And it brings me on to asking one of my favorite questions of the entire podcast. It is, talk to me about the importance of having a strong mindset. How vital is that to not only you as a professional footballer, but you as a person as well?
Yeah, massively. I think something I was told when I was young is people are going to talk about you and people aren't going to like you no matter what you're doing or whatever. So don't live your life trying to please other people. It's only going to hold you back. So yeah, as I say, if you speak to anyone, I'm the first person, I'm the prankster probably in most settings that I'm in. Like, just don't take life too seriously, because if you're yourself, then you've got the right people around you for the right reasons, and your mindset will be tested. And anybody that have even experienced success or not, mindset's tested every single day. The first mindset test that probably most people have every morning is whether to hit snooze or actually get out of bed. And actually, when you take things back to basics, that's just as much as a challenge as scoring a penalty in a game in 90 minutes. It's your mind is the most powerful thing that there is. It's stronger than any physical part of your body. So train it the way you would physical. Make sure you're looking after it the way you would look after, your muscles or your bones. And if you're struggling with it, take it with the same importance as you would with your physical health. And I think being open and honest and with your own, mindset and whether that is going well, not going well, within there you've faced and overcame so many challenges just to get to where you are, whether that's looking at it from an hour's point of view, a day's point of view, a month, or your full life. Like, what you believe in, strive for it, achieve it, and stick by it, because at the end of the day, the best person at being you is yourself. So you might have some haters, people might not like it, but hey, you wouldn't want to just have friends because you're pretending to be somebody you're not.
Yeah, that's absolutely spot on. And you 100% agree with everything that you've just said there. And I think with your competitive nature and with your mindset and that strong mindset and that determined mindset, it's obviously led to great things in your career. And one of those great things I always find, when I was a kid growing up, I always dreamt of representing my country, and you've had the ability and the dream of what it is to represent your country. You've been able to achieve that. How big a moment in your career was it being in the Scotland squad, then playing for the team, then ultimately even scoring for Scotland? How big a role does being a Scottish international and the pride that comes alongside that? What does it all mean to you?
Yeah, it's massive. I think, growing up and girls football and Scottish football and playing, for Celtic, that very much were, front runners in terms of youth football. It was being involved in the international setup was kind of something that was probably more easily accessible and not so far out of the reach, that it kind of just came in terms of the youth. It kind of just came along, and I never ever took it for granted, but it was something that if I wasn't within the squad, I would be disappointed. I wasn't expecting or arrogant in that sense, but it just seemed like the healthy progression and the natural progression, that I was playing well for club, and the recognition then came internationally. And obviously, as you get older, the chances of that are obviously decreasing, just in terms of, well, when you're growing up, you get older than 15s, older than 17s, but you're in the seniors for a while. And I think probably in terms of my story with international, I was first capped at 18, I think it was. And then probably maybe between my first and my second cap was maybe a year. And then the second and third came in the same week. And then after that, it was probably 2.5 years maybe until it came again. So it's easy to lose sight and lose focus of where you want to be, and maybe what seems where you can be, especially, you know, through the injuries and stuff like that. But my opportunities through the national team is again came from the way Celtic came in the sense of it was somebody else's misfortune and an injury or an illness that essentially I got the call up, and it is just, you know, everything I'd been doing all these years and leaving no stone unturned and being the hardest working person in the room. I was ready and I was ready to go. And that opportunity, I hope that I've taken and have put the doubt in the manager's mind of, God, we can't let her leave the squad again. And it's massive, you know, probably more so my family feel the pride now than I do, as I say, because it does feel like that natural progression and that's where I want to be. And I'm not, I'm not content just being in there as an extra training player or being in there and coming on as a sub. You know, I want to be there and I want to be starting. I want to be, you know, a record goal scorer and aiming high, just because for me, you know, why settle and just being mediocre. So the pride just now probably comes more from a family, you know, when I scored, they were all there and it was 5 minutes from where I grew up. And for them, I think it's nice to have that on your journey, because God, they gave up more sacrifices than me, whether that's my parents taking me to football training and not having dinner that night because we're out for hours, or my little brother and sister, mainly my little sister, you know, she probably doesn't really have a hobby as such because she was at the side of a football pitch more nights than not. So it made it hard to test the game, but it's the sacrifices that, you know, it's nice to be able to give them a little something back. But yeah, of course, pulling on the national strip and singing the national anthem and being there, you know, some of those girls, the likes of Erin Cuthbert, we first met when we were maybe 4 or 5 years old, and our boys' teams playing against each other. And albeit we've never played in the same club team, but it's a journey that you go on together. And honestly, outside of football, people will never understand that team camaraderie. And, you know, we see each other more than we see our families. And it really is special to have friends and best friends that understand and are similar and likewise to you, and being able to look back and achieve that dream. Because I think I posted about it after the game, like me and Erin sang the national anthem together at under 15 Scotland, and if you'd told both of us then that we would be doing it at Hampden, albeit we both wanted it very much, it's, you know, the chances of it are slim. So we enjoy the moments together as a squad, as a family and individually, but I won't take my foot off the gas, and I think I won't appreciate and understand the magnitude of where I've got to and what I've done until, you know, I hang up my boots and can look back and see the next generation try it.
I find it really, really interesting, you know, hearing about international football, because I often find it's a very small select number get the opportunity, you know, to play for their country and to represent their country. And I think it's often a stamp of approval in the sense of you're one of the best in this country, you know, at what you do. Out of all the people doing this, you've been selected. And I think that's something to take a lot of pride in. You know, but something you said as well, you're not happy just being there. You're not happy just being a sub. You want to be a starter and a record goal scorer. And I think that's an unbelievably brilliant attitude to have. And again, for our listeners listening into this, I think that's something to take from this conversation, is that Abby has never settled and she won't settle. You know, when she's out on rehab, she's working hard to be the best in the rehab group to get back to playing football. And I think that hard work and that dedication that has followed you all through your career is absolutely phenomenal. And it's a great testament to your career and to your dedication so far. And I think so far in your career, and I know you're very young, still only 24, there's a lot more to go, but it's a phenomenal attitude to have, you know, for someone so young still in the sport, I think.
Yeah, no, and you know, that's just one way to be, and one personality. As I say, the beauty of team game is the array of different people and personalities you'll come across. And God, if there was a changing room full of me's, it would be a volatile place. So we've all got our place, and we all bring something so pure to a changing room, whether that's internationally or playing at club. You know, it's about all the different personalities, and that's the hardest thing for a manager, is finding the personalities that complement each other off the pitch and translating that on the pitch. But that's just the way that I work and the way that's worked for me. And as I say, I might have missed out on a few opportunities or had a few bad words said about me because of that way. And I won't be everyone's cup of tea, but I'm my own, and I'll stand by, how I am and what I believe in, and hopefully it continues with the success it's had.
Yeah, hopefully it does indeed. And Abby, I just want to thank you for giving me your time today as we wrap up this podcast. I know obviously you're a busy lady. You've got a lot of stuff going on there with Bristol City. I want to wish you the best for the upcoming season or the continuing season.
Thank you.
Good luck with that. Good luck with the Scotland squad. Unless you're playing Northern Ireland, then I don't wish you good luck. I hope you miss any opportunities. But that's just a little bit of bias coming out right there. But honestly, thank you so much for your time today. And just before I let you go, where can any of our listeners catch up with you, follow you, and connect with you on social media?
Oh God, you've put me on the spot. Instagram is Abigail Harrison 21, I think it is. And Twitter, I think, is Abby Harrison _. But you'll probably see my face somewhere, or if you go on Bristol City's page, you'll probably be able to find me there. But not the biggest social media fan, but yeah, if anybody gets in touch, whatever, I'll always find a way and get back to anybody.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And thank you for your time. Thank you for, giving us the opportunity to explore your journey, explore your mindset, and talk to you about your performance as well. This has been the Matchfit Football Podcast. I'm Darren Potts. Remember to check out Matchfit Football on Instagram, Twitter, and all the usual platforms as well. So, Abby, thanks again for coming on the show.
Cheers. Thanks for having me.